Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's Wednesday Wisdom guest, but let's recognize our podcast partners, Florida Coaches Coalition, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, We Coach, and the global community of women in high school sports. You've heard me say before that these four organizations should definitely be a part of your network. So check them out. And now don't hit that fast forward button. Stay with us for just 3 minutes. Listen to our sponsorship messages. And if you're a high school AD, these are vendors that you should definitely be working with. So check it out. We want to thank Huddle for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the smart cameras, the mobile apps. Of course, they love the analytics, but they loved all the tools that Huddle provided to them, to our teams, and to our athletes. Huddle's a complete professional grade solution. And if you go to huddle.com, you're going to see why they believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to gipper.com and see how athletic directors are creating custom branded content for their school's social media channel. Use our code ADPOD10 and you'll get 10% off. That's gipper.com. Create custom content for your school's social media channel. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school's record boards for all your teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Check out their great products. And when you're ready to order, use the link vitalsignswalloffame.com/Jake, and you'll get a nice discount. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Bring your school's legacy to life. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to show you how to set up and sell your tickets online, not just for athletic events, but for all your events, things like plays, concerts, dances, even graduation. And the best part, every step of the way, you'll have a dedicated client success manager that's providing you hands-on support. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com. Check it out today. Simple and easy online ticketing. We also want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. One of the best purchases I ever made was our indoor score table from Sideline Interactive. It not only generates income for our department, but it also creates the ultimate game day experience for our student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule a live web demo today. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. Athletic surveys are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire program. ADs usually only hear from that 2%, the squeaky wheel parent or the frustrated student athlete. And we need to hear back from them so we can affect change in our department. But we also need to hear back from the 98% that really love and support our program. And that's where Athletic Surveys comes in. They're going to create a custom survey that allows you to take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. That's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking to that squeaky wheel parent, your school board, or your principal. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Get started today. athleticsurveys.com. And we want to say thanks to Snap Mobile. Snap Mobile is the parent company for an entire suite of platforms designed to help you do your job better. There's Snap Store, Snap Manage, Snap Connect, and of course, there's Snap Raise, their fundraising platform. We've used Snap Raise with great success, and so can you. They even have a program where you can get your money before you actually start your fundraiser. I don't think anybody else offers that. Go to snapraise.com. Check it out today. That's snapraise.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. One of our founding Wednesday Wisdom team members is back for her 5th installment. We've been doing this just a little over a year, and I always love spending time with Misty Buck. If you're new to Wednesday Wisdom, Misty is a former athlete, a coach. She's also a very successful author. That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. She's a branding expert, and she also hosts her own popular podcast. Her first book was called The Athlete's Mental Health Playbook. And her new book, well, I'm going to let her talk about her new book. Misty, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom.
Thank you so much. Always with this stellar introduction. I love it. Thank you.
Well, you and I were talking before we came on, and I'm really excited. I'm always excited to talk to you, but I'm really excited about this topic because I think it is so important for athletic directors from their school perspective, but also how they work with coaches and with student athletes. So tell us about the new book.
Yeah, so the new book, it's kind of a funny story. So my for those of you that don't know or you're just hearing about me, I'm a mental health and mindset coach for athletes, but I also have a background in marketing. I actually also own a digital marketing agency here in Miami. We've been around for 15 years, and I was working in marketing before that. So somebody said to me one day, why don't you, actually a few people, when's your next book coming out? I was like, I don't know. I don't have plans for my next book. You're like, write one and you're like, oh, that was enough of a feat, right? And they said, whoa, well, why don't you, I don't even know what I would write about. Why don't you write about your mindset stuff and mental health stuff and combine that with what you know about marketing? And I was like, how do you even put that together? Right. So I thought about it and I thought about it and I sat with it and sat with it. And finally, I was like, you know what? This actually makes a lot of sense, because I think that we have to approach branding from, we were talking a little bit off air about this, from the inner stuff. And then that drives the outer part of your brand, which we'll get into. But the book, I'll just, for those watching the video, it's called Athlete Branding Blueprint. And the tagline is a holistic guide to creating your legacy from marketing to mindset. So that's really what it is. Really, the first half is all about building out the mindset pieces, understanding your values, understanding your how different maybe potential blocks like imposter syndrome or feeling like you're not good enough or negative thought habits can actually block you from creating a successful brand. So we want to walk through all that stuff. And then the second half, I actually teach you how to build your brand. And there's a whole chapter with a bunch of worksheets. So it's pretty fun. It came together and I'm really proud of it. So thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And again, listeners, I really encourage you to, if you're not following Misty on LinkedIn or Twitter, get the first book. And again, the new book, Athlete Branding Blueprint. Let's go ahead, if we can. Branding has really become so important now for athletic directors to brand their school and their athletic teams and promote their student athletes. What are some things that you cover in your book that are going to help, let's say, somebody who's late to the game? They're not good with social media, they don't understand branding. We know it's important, so you don't have to sell us on it, but how do they get started on it? What are some, maybe a couple of do's and don'ts that you might cover in your book?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a bunch of that actually in the book. But as any good coach will tell you, I want to start with the fundamentals.
Okay.
And the fundamentals of building your brand is first and foremost understanding that your brand is much more than a logo and a tagline and a color scheme and a website, right? Like kind of all those things that we look at as sort of like these very linear, tangible examples of what our brand is. But what's really a brand? Like, let's think about, we're talking about the fundamentals. Let's think about that for a second. So when you're building an organization or you're building a team and you want to bring everybody together, one of the things that you need to do is define your values, right? Because your values are what builds that team culture. It puts everyone on the same mission, right? And then you create a goal. And now we're all working within those values to achieve the goal. And that actually is a big driver in your brand. And I think those fundamentals should drive your brand. So if these are not things that you're absolutely clear on in your organization, might be, or maybe, it hasn't been, you haven't revisited it in a while, take some time and look at it. Look at those values, look at the intention that you're setting and that you're putting up. And then ask yourself questions like, how am I showing up? How is my organization showing up? Are we really embodying these values? And Jake, the reason that's so important is because I like to explain branding, as you can tell, at a little bit of a different way. And that is that your brand is basically your reputation, right? So as an individual, as an organization, however you want to look at it. And that's important because, again, your reputation, people take away from you how you make them feel, how you interact with them, how you help them or don't help them, what your personality's like, right? So those are all things that drive how people perceive you. But the same goes for your brand. Your brand is pretty much a personality, right? So I think that those are really important fundamentals to start with, because if you're not clear on those things, the brand that you're creating is not going to click.
Again, I love the phrase that you used, your brand. I don't know if I'm using your same word, the brand that's who you are. And sometimes that, can be a challenge, not just for athletic directors, but also for student athletes. Maybe they've had great success as a sophomore, but as they're becoming a junior and a senior, that's got to be potential minefield for a youngster to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, we're all always going through the ebbs and flows of life. And unfortunately, fortunately now we have more of a platform than ever because things are so public, right? But unfortunately, that means like everybody sees everything almost. So, there's definitely a unique challenge there that today's student athletes are facing. And I think that's why it's important to be really clear on who you are and what's important to you. So, for example, I was teaching a class on this very topic about the book to a class of graduate students at UCLA. And we were talking about this idea that, sometimes we build this character in our mind of who we think we have to be. And whether it's really aligned with who we are or not, we're trying to fit into this character as an athlete of whoever this we think these people think that this athlete should be, versus how we feel and what's really right with us. And what happens is when you build this character, which a lot of us do this because we want to be approved, right? We want to be popular. We want to have the brand that sells. We want to be recruitable, all these things, or we want to be accepted by our peers, whatever, you know what I mean? There's just different things that go into that. But anyhow, the question was, think about a time when you did something knowing that it wasn't aligned with you, but you did it anyway, and sort of what were the consequences of that? And I think we can get ourselves out of a lot of trouble if we, I teach a lot of mindfulness. Mental peace, as you know, is my jam. And so mindfulness is a really big piece of that. So if we can slow down and pause and think, okay, does this really align with who I am? Does this really align with my values? And then take action from there. So I think for student athletes and young people out there, I think that's a really important piece to think about, because at the end of the day, you're going to be the most proud of that. So Kobe, for example, Kobe Bryant talked about, it's not that he was the Mamba mentality and Black Mamba, that's who he was, right? It was at a different level when he was performing, but who he was on and off the court were the same person. So that when he walked off the court, he was proud of the person on the court. And when he was on the court, he was proud of the person off the court. They were one because he was really clear on who he was. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably hard for younger people, to make that or to have the sophistication, or I guess the life perspective, to be able to understand
Yeah.
who they are when they're not an athlete, when they're
Right.
not a volleyball player, when they're not a soccer player. Well, who am I? Okay. I know one of the things that you mentioned to me was it's important for people, whether it's an athletic director, a coach, or a student athlete, to not let negativity affect you. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. And kind of going off of the last topic. So look, you're going to make mistakes. This is, something I talk a lot about with my stepdaughter who's 19. Like, you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. My mom is going to make mistakes. Every generation, we're all making mistakes. The key is that when you make a mistake, can you notice that you make a mistake, acknowledge it, and then learn from that so that you are moving on. And I think that's what's important for younger people to understand is you've got to handle things with grace with yourself, and that helps with that negativity. So can I have more grace in this moment? I made a mistake, and I have more grace. Can I own up to that? And then what can I learn from this moving forward? So I just want to be clear about that piece, because it's not about perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. There's no perfect brand. There's no perfect human being. It doesn't exist. So what do? You learn and you do better, right? There's a saying, when you know better, you do better. So that's that piece. But in the book, we go over all kinds of stuff about negativity. There's actually a chapter of how to make negativity work for you. Because I think that there's, people think of negativity like, oh, it's a super terrible thing, but it's actually really teachable. And I think that's important to embrace that as well, and not get stuck in a mindset of have to be perfect. I have to always be positive. I have to always be happy. That's impossible. You're a human being. So how do you navigate that? And that's a part of what we talk about in the book, because understanding how to navigate that, again, will help you as you're developing your brand.
For our listeners, we're visiting today with Misty Buck, successful entrepreneur, author, branding expert. She's got a new book out called The Athlete Branding Blueprint. It's on Amazon. It's available to all, local booksellers. Make sure you get a copy. Misty, without going into the book, we want people to go out and buy it, obviously, but what are some of the things, getting back to the branding,
Sure.
what are some things that you're going to share in the book, and why should our readers or listeners, I'm telling you should, but why should our listeners go out and get it?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking for a different approach, more of a holistic approach to a brand beyond just these sort of, I don't really like cold textbooks where it's like, do this, this, and this. Like, that's not what this is. This is clear, it's basic, it's actionable. There's worksheets. You're going to get in there, do the work, start to figure out some of these things through the different exercises that I put in there. And like, for example, some of those chapters are about the fundamental principles in marketing. Then I walk you through the steps to create your brand. I talk about transition branding tips. So if you're an athlete transitioning out of sports, like, how do you create your brand if you're in that transition and you're not? That's important, because a lot of former athletes get stuck feeling like they built their brand as being an athlete. Now nobody's interested in their brand anymore, now that they're not an active athlete anymore. So that's why that's in there. And then there's a bunch in there about worksheets, but I give you, all kinds of what I think in my 20+ career in marketing are basics, but that if you follow them and you take these actionable steps and have this depth of understanding, that you will be able to create that holistic brand and put it into practice. That's what's most important to me. I don't like books that just like, here's some information, good luck with that. Like, I like, here's how you apply that. And that's what this brings to the table. So whether you're working again through that imposter syndrome mindset, whether you're working through whatever the different mindset pieces are that might be holding you back, that you may not even realize, and then how do you actualize, put the brand out there?
It really sounds like, the approach that you take, the holistic approach, makes it, much more personal and applicable to, this student athlete or this AD who might be in a completely different environment situation than, someone in, California, New York, et cetera, that, the holistic, finding out who you are and how it works at your school. Is that a good way to summarize it?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, because we're looking at, I get in there into helping you figure out what your core messages are, who are your core audiences, what are your core offers, what do you stand for, and then again building that messaging around that, all those things. There's even the whole first worksheet in there is just pages of building out your vision.
Well, again, sounds like a great second book. We're glad that you finally came up with that. It's the Athlete Branding Blueprint, a holistic approach. Again, you can find it on Amazon or wherever they sell books. Misty Buck is the author. Misty, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit more, and listeners, you've got a tremendous resource here. What's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So you can get me on social media at the Misty Buck on pretty much every networks. I say that because there's a couple Misty Bucks out there, believe it or not. So my handle is typically branded the Misty Buck, one word, and Buck is spelled Buck. So you can get me that way on social media. And if you wanted to check out my website and fill out the contact form, just that you are comfortable doing that, that's Purpose, PURPOSE, Soul, SOUL, athletics.com. So purposesoulathletics.com. You can also check out our services, the blog, free resources, contact me directly there, whatever works.
Okay. Misty Buck, thanks so much for spending some time with us again on Wednesday Wisdom. All the best with the new book and with everything you got going on. Always great to spend some time with you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. As always, you're like one of my number one fans, so I'm super appreciative. Thank you.
Well, and you continue to send some of your big name clients our way for interviews. So we do appreciate that as well. Okay.
You're welcome.
For our listeners, we do this every single week with Wednesday Wisdom. We also upload the Zoom videos to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Come back next time for another great Wednesday Wisdom, and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. But once again, for the book, The Athlete Branding Blueprint, a Holistic Approach by Misty Buck. Go out and get it, and we'll see you next time on Wednesday Wisdom. One more time, that's The Athlete Branding Blueprint by Misty Buck. Go out and get yourself a copy. Before we go, we want to acknowledge our podcast sponsors. These are companies that I've used personally as an athletic director or as a coach, with one exception. That's Hometown Ticketing. But I've talked to hundreds of athletic directors who swear by Hometown Ticketing, and that's good enough for me. So go to hometownticketing.com, check them out today. We want to thank Huddle. As a football coach, as an AD, Huddle was great for our schools. Go to huddle.com and find out all the things they can do for you. Gipper.com. Talk about branding, social media. Go to Gipper.com. Tell them you heard about it on the podcast. They'll give you 10% off. There's a lot of fundraising platforms out there. I think they're probably all very good, but I don't know of another one that will give you your money before you actually start your fundraiser. You'll find that at SnapRaise. Go to snapraise.com. We've used it. You should use it too. We want to say thanks to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school records or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Tell them you heard about it on the podcast. You'll get a nice discount from them too. Want to thank Sideline Interactive indoor score tables and video boards. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. SidelineInteractive.com. And finally, athletic surveys by LifeTrack. My school, we use surveys for just about everything, and you should too. The information that they can provide you is invaluable, especially when you're talking to your principal, your school board, or that squeaky wheel parent. Most of your parents love your programs. You need to have that data in your hands. So go to athleticsurveys.com. Let them put together a custom survey for you and your program. Thanks again for listening to Wednesday Wisdom. We will see you next time as part of the Educational AD podcast. Have a great day.